Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: why liberals have ended up cheerleading for jihadism. Mr. Security, Hamas war tarnishes Netanyahu's image as Israel's defender. Fears of wider Middle East conflict cast shadow over global economy. Polls vote in election that could redefine ties with West. AP Top 25 Takeaways, Oregon-Washington embrace four-down football, resetting the Heisman Trophy race. Why liberals have ended up cheerleading for jihadism. Telegraph. The rise of anti-Semitism in the UK can be attributed to a confluence of cultural factors, according to an op-ed in The Telegraph. The author, Jake Wallace-Simons, traces the roots of modern anti-Semitism to the rise of the Nazi Party in the 1930s and the Soviet Union's anti-Semitic propaganda campaigns during the Cold War. He argues that the toxic combination of far-left ideology and American identity politics has created an environment in which Israelophobia and anti-Semitic tropes flourish. Simon suggests that the influence of progressive elites in institutions such as universities, the civil service, and the media has allowed anti-Semitic views to become mainstream. He argues that these elites, who he describes as progressive activists, exert disproportionate power and have made certain beliefs, such as support for Palestine and opposition to Israel, taboo. Simons argues that these beliefs are often held as a signifier of social status rather than as genuine moral positions. The author also highlights the role of the Soviet Union's disinformation campaign in shaping anti-Israel sentiment. He notes that the KGB's campaign, known as SIG, flooded the world with Israelophobic propaganda that accused the Jewish state of racism, white supremacism, ethnic cleansing, colonialism, and apartheid. These tropes, Simons argues, have persisted in modern culture and have been adopted by the far left as part of its anti-Israel agenda. Mr. Security, Hamas war tarnishes Netanyahu's image as Israel's defender. Financial Times. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been politically impacted by Hamas's devastating attack on his country's territory. The attack has led to the deaths of at least 1,300 people in Israel and wounded more than 3,000, while 120 were taken hostage. Palestinian officials said 2,215 people had been killed by Israeli strikes in Gaza and more than 8,700 people had been wounded. The attack on the country's territory has tarnished Netanyahu's security credentials and cast a deep shadow over his political future. There has been recrimination with Netanyahu's office insisting he had not received advance warnings about the attack, after reports in the Israeli press claimed intelligence had been received the night before of unusual movements by Hamas within Gaza. Netanyahu's strategy of trying to contain the militants with a mixture of military deterrence and economic inducements has been criticized. Fears of wider Middle East conflict cast shadow over global economy. Financial Times. The ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East poses a significant threat to the global economy, according to finance ministers and officials. The conflict could result in higher energy prices, stirring inflation, and declining confidence. The International Monetary Fund, IMF, warned of worsening long-term growth trends, noting that economies are struggling to lift productivity and public debt is rising globally. Officials also highlighted concerns over mounting trade barriers and rising fiscal risks as the global public debt ratio nears 100% of GDP. Polls vote in election that could redefine ties with West. Financial Times. Poland's ruling Law and Justice, PiS, party, led by Jarosław Kaczynski, is seeking an unprecedented third term in office in today's election. PiS has campaigned on a nationalist platform, questioning Poland's support for Ukraine, which has raised concerns about the country's role in the EU. Opposition leader and former Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, wants to reposition Warsaw on a firm pro-European path and restore the independence of judges. Opinion polls show PiS leading by about 5 percentage points, but neither party is expected to secure sufficient votes to govern alone. AP Top 25 Takeaways, Oregon-Washington embrace four-down football, resetting the Heisman Trophy race. The Toronto Star. Oregon's head football coach Dan Lanning has made it clear that he believes punting and place-kicking should be a last resort. This was seen in the recent game against Washington, where the Ducks failed on 3 fourth-down attempts, including passing on a chip-shot field goal and not punting on a 4th and 3 near midfield. Lanning's aggressive approach to fourth downs has been criticized, with some suggesting that he is too reliant on analytics. However, in modern college football where yards are not hard to come by for talented quarterbacks, Lanning's approach is justifiable. Despite the loss to Washington, Lanning should not be solely blamed, as the game was entertaining and his process is fine. The article also discusses the Heisman Trophy race, with Caleb Williams' chances taking a hit after throwing 3 interceptions in a loss to Notre Dame. Michael Penix Jr. is currently the Heisman favorite, with other contenders including Dylan Gabriel, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, J.J. McCarthy, Carson Beck, Marvin Harrison, and Brock Bowers. Sebastian Coe says IOC made only decision in banning Russia. Japan Times. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, has suspended Russia's national Olympic body for violating the territorial integrity of Ukraine. The decision was made after the Russian Olympic Committee recognized regional organizations from 4 Ukrainian territories that were annexed since Russia's invasion began in 2022. World Athletics, on the other hand, had already excluded competitors, coaches, and officials from Russia and Belarus from its events since March 2022. Number 10 USC turns in ugly performance, no longer undefeated following 48-20 loss to number 21 Notre Dame. Yahoo! USC's sloppy play caught up with them on Saturday night as they fell to Notre Dame 48-20. 3 interceptions by Heisman Trophy-winning quarterback Caleb Williams in the first half all led to Notre Dame touchdowns, and the Trojans found themselves in a 24-6 hole at halftime. Although they cleaned up their act in the second half, every time USC threatened to make the game competitive, the Irish would respond with a touchdown of their own. The Trojans are now 6-1 on the year, with a tough stretch of games ahead. John Lee Eldridge III goes the distance, capping Air Force's rally past Wyoming. Associated Press. Air Force Academy defeated Wyoming 34-27 in a Mountain West Conference battle for first place. Air Force rallied from a halftime deficit of 21-17 to secure the win. John Lee Eldridge III scored the go-ahead touchdown with 2:17 remaining in the game. The win kept Air Force undefeated at 6-0 and in sole possession of first place in the conference. U.S. sending second carrier strike group, fighter jets to region as Israel prepares to expand Gaza operations. CNN. The Pentagon has ordered a second carrier strike group to the eastern Mediterranean Sea and is sending Air Force fighter jets to the region as Israel prepares to expand its Gaza operations. The U.S. warships are not intended to join the fighting in Gaza or take part in Israel's operations, but the presence of 2 of the Navy's most powerful vessels is designed to send a message of deterrence to Iran and Iranian proxies in the region. The first carrier strike group, led by the USS Gerald R. Ford, arrived off the coast of Israel last week. Wrap-up 1 Gaza braces for Israeli ground assault, fears of conflict spreading grow. Yahoo! The Israeli military is preparing for a ground assault on the Gaza Strip, as it retaliates against the Hamas militant group who stormed through Israeli towns, killing 1,300 people. The attack by Hamas was the worst assault on civilians in Israel's history. Israel has vowed to destroy Hamas. The country has subjected Gaza to its most intense bombardment ever, putting the enclave, which is home to 2.3 million Palestinians, under siege. Gaza authorities have said that more than 2,200 people have been killed, a quarter of them children, and nearly 10,000 wounded. 1 million people have reportedly left their homes. Iran has warned of far-reaching consequences if Israel's bombardment is not stopped. Both Hamas and Hezbollah are backed by Iran. The US and other world leaders have warned against any country broadening the conflict, and international organizations and aid groups have urged calm and pressed Israel to allow humanitarian assistance to get through. Meanwhile, Russia has asked the UN Security Council to vote on a draft resolution calling for a humanitarian ceasefire and condemning violence against civilians and all acts of terrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the sixth dimension. Today, we delved into a variety of news stories, from the rise of anti-Semitism in the UK to the political impact of Hamas's attack on Israel. We also explored the potential economic consequences of the conflict in the Middle East and the upcoming election in Poland. On a lighter note, we discussed college football and the Heisman Trophy race, as well as the IOC's decision to ban Russia from the Olympics. Finally, we touched on USC's loss to Notre Dame and Air Force's victory over Wyoming. Now, let's dive into the analysis. The rise of anti-Semitism in the UK is a complex issue with roots in historical events and modern cultural factors. The toxic combination of far-left ideology and American identity politics has created an environment where Israelophobia and anti-Semitic tropes flourish. The influence of progressive elites in institutions such as universities, the civil service, and the media has allowed these views to become mainstream. It's important to recognize that support for Palestine and opposition to Israel are sometimes held as a social status symbol rather than genuine moral positions. Moving on to the Middle East conflict, the ongoing battle between Israel and Hamas has far-reaching implications for the global economy. Finance ministers and officials are concerned about the potential for higher energy prices, inflation, and declining confidence. The International Monetary Fund warns of worsening long-term growth trends and rising public debt globally. The situation is further complicated by mounting trade barriers and fiscal risks. The world must tread carefully to prevent further escalation and economic fallout. In Poland, the ruling Law and Justice Party seeks an unprecedented third term in office. The party's nationalist platform has raised concerns about Poland's role in the EU. On the other hand, the opposition leader aims to reposition Warsaw on a pro-European path and restore the independence of judges. While the ruling party is leading in the polls, neither side is expected to secure enough votes to govern alone. The outcome of this election could redefine Poland's ties with the West. Shifting gears to sports, we discuss the recent college football game between Oregon and Washington. Oregon's head coach, Dan Lanning, has been criticized for his aggressive approach to fourth downs. However, in today's game where talented quarterbacks can easily gain yards, his strategy is justifiable. Meanwhile, in the Heisman Trophy race, Caleb Williams' chances took a hit after throwing 3 interceptions in a loss to Notre Dame. Michael Penix Jr. currently leads the pack, but there are several other contenders in the mix. On the global stage, the IOC has suspended Russia's national Olympic body for violating Ukraine's territorial integrity. This decision comes after World Athletics had already excluded Russian and Belarusian competitors from its events. It's a clear message that actions have consequences, even in the world of sports. Lastly, we discussed USC's loss to Notre Dame and Air Force's victory over Wyoming. USC's sloppy play and Caleb Williams' interceptions proved costly, while Air Force's comeback secured their undefeated record and first place in their conference. That's all for today's news recap and analysis. It's been a pleasure sharing my insights with you. Now, it's your turn. What are your thoughts on these news stories? Do you have any questions or comments? I'm all ears. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.